the comments that are said to women after a miscarriage are just, it blows my mind how people try to simplify what happened. I really try to teach others when somebody's going through something so hard and they just want somebody to understand that pain and you just brush it off like it was a nothing, makes it that much worse.
Samantha Busch is wife to NASCAR champion Kyle Busch, mother of two, entrepreneur, lifestyle blogger, IVF advocate, philanthropist, co-owner of a professional race team, and author of the book Fighting Infertility. Samantha has been open about her decade-long struggle through infertility, miscarriage, and surrogacy, and I am thrilled to have her on the show today to share her story and lessons learned. Samantha, thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you. I'm so excited to chat today.
I really have been so appreciative of how open you've been about your challenges and the fights that you've faced to build your family. When did you first know something was wrong?
I started getting a little suspicious when I came off birth control and my body just wasn't reacting right. And I kept telling myself, well, you've been on birth control for so many years. This is probably normal. Your body's probably quote unquote detoxing the birth control out. And I just noticed as the months went by, it was actually getting worse, not better. And unfortunately, when I called to try to get an appointment, this was back, as you mentioned, almost 10 years ago, they said, oh, well, if it hasn't been a year, we don't need to see you. You're fine. Just keep trying. And that was really unfortunate to know now what we know and to know how much heartache and more months we could have prevented from having to see another failed pregnancy test.
Yeah. Kind of as I read through your book and listen to you talk about your journey, follow you on Instagram, I kind of feel like this has been a long fight and there's like certain rounds. And like round one was it not happening as you planned. I so appreciated you describing yourself as like a planner and like on the Pinterest board and being like, oh, well, if we have the baby in the summer birthday parties are so much fun for kids. And then you're like, well, maybe a Christmas baby.
We were so young. I mean, I was 25. We were healthy, just never thought that there was going to be an issue. And then on top of it, my friends were getting pregnant month 1, 2, maybe 3. So I just never thought that there was really going to be an issue for us. Finally, it was almost the year mark and I was just having a number of health issues and it was like, I'm sorry, I really need to be seen now. We are still not pregnant. And again, this was at a time when people didn't openly discuss infertility. There weren't support groups. There wasn't Instagram to turn to like connect with people and learn from their stories. So I just felt very, very alone in this whole journey. And so finally got seen by the OBGYN and quickly they diagnosed me at PCOS just with an ultrasound. And they're like, oh yeah, you have this. We're going to put you on Clomid. You'll be pregnant, no problem. So we did 5 cycles of that and finally got referred to a fertility clinic, which now I know you don't actually need a referral for. And I remember sitting there with our doctor and I was bringing him all my paperwork and telling him everything. And he's like, okay, well, I need to see, Kyle's results. And I was like, no, I'm the one with the problem. And he was like, please tell me you did not do 5 rounds of Clomid and your husband hasn't been tested. So lo and behold, we found out that on top of my PCOS, he had male factor. And at this point, we're over 18 months into this journey. So it was just heartbreaking to know that now there's kits that come to your house that would have told us all this information. So for a year and a half, we blindly struggled.
Not making assumptions and getting everybody tested and understanding that just because there's one issue that you might be struggling with, it doesn't mean that there aren't multiple, which, oh my goodness, if I were a listener and I heard that, I'd be like, wait, there's going to be more. But I just mean like get the full picture before you make assumptions.
I had known a little bit about IVF, but I thought, okay, if Clomid doesn't work, we'll get to try IUI and then we'll go to IVF. But when we had our consultation, they were like, nope, the IVF is your only option. So that's the road we went down. And honestly, the first round was textbook perfect. So
once you figured out these issues, you're like, okay, we're going to do IVF and that is going to solve everything. And your cycle went well, lots of eggs, lots of embryos. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understand is your first transfer was successful and you have Brexton from your first transfer. Is that correct?
It is correct. So I just assumed that once after that, and it went so well, I assumed when you did IVF, it was almost a guarantee. And I especially assumed that when my body carried a pregnancy to full term, no complications, we did genetic testing, and that really ups your chances. So what we faced afterwards, I just never imagined in our journey.
Yeah, I do see my patients coming back to add to their family. They've got embryos cryopreserved, ready and waiting. A little bit flippant, sort of like, yeah, well, and they should be, because they did. Their first transfer was successful, and that's exactly the way it should happen. I'm always a big cheerleader. I want to stay positive, but I'm like, hey, I just want you to know, like, not every embryo transfer is successful. Like, there's a chance that when we try again, that it might not happen again the first time. And you can just sort of see their shoulders drop a little bit and just kind of like, I was building up all the courage to come back and try again. And you're right, Dr. Shahine, but oh my goodness.
My doctor, as you do, cautioned, like, hey, it might not work. But I was not one of the patients who got discouraged by it. I completely ignored it. And therefore, I decided that I was going to bring everybody on social with us because I wanted them to understand what a full cycle looked like. I wanted them to understand the shots and the medications and the transfer, because I just naively, yes, I was cautioned, but I was like, yeah, no, that's not me. I'm very young and I had a baby. Thank you for the warning, but no thanks. So everybody knew, and we announced right after Thanksgiving that we were pregnant, and then less than a week later, unfortunately miscarried. And it was very hard. No warning signs. Very, for lack of a better term, my second miscarriage ended in a DNC, and I didn't, you don't see any of it. This was like a very in-your-face miscarriage, if that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah, it's traumatic.
It was very traumatizing. I write about it in the book. I will never forget. I had been trying on a dress. We were getting ready to go to our end of year banquet. I had a robe on. I was playing with our son, and I just felt something wet, and instinctively your first thing is like, did I just pee? Like, what happened? Mm-hmm. And so I just remember putting my hand down there and coming up, and my hand was just covered in blood, and my son was there. And so he was like, what happened? And I was like, I cut myself. Go get your dad. And so Kyle comes running up the stairs thinking I somehow cut my hand open and, put two and two together. And when I went through a miscarriage, it was even more cruel that we went there and they were like, well, your cervix is closed, so there's still a shot. And it was just kind of holding on to that hope for 48 hours, soul crushing when we went back in and they confirmed that it was a miscarriage. So that was really difficult. I wrote about it, what it also did from a marriage perspective, because it is very hard. And in the book, I try to talk with professional therapists to help give people some tips and tricks that they advise that we felt helped us, because I think that's an aspect not really discussed a lot, is just that trauma and overwhelming emotions and how that really affects your marriage throughout everything.
Did you and Kyle talk about how different people, whether you're a man or a woman, or just how different people handle different things? And was that at all a source of the conflict?
Our therapist, our marriage counselor, explained to us. So I was on one side, that I was highly emotional, wanted to continue to talk about it. It was just like this festering wound that I just kept picking at. He was, I guess, for lack of a better word, annoyed that I couldn't move on. I was annoyed that he seemed to be moving on too fast. So everything then, we would butt heads over it, because the underlying issue was that we were mad at each other for not being in the same point of grieving.
And you are able to continue trying, because that is sometimes what it takes to build your family is the ability to keep trying. And if two people are in complete conflict, sometimes it's hard to move forward. And so taking that time and working with a professional can be really, really helpful. I have definitely seen that in my own practice.
Yeah, I will say it probably took us almost a good year to be ready to try again. Everybody's timeline's different. And I think just allowing yourself the time that you need instead of just jumping into it before you've completely processed all those emotions is really helpful.
I'm just curious about the pros and cons of going through a miscarriage or going through trying to add to your family just in the public eye, and some of the things that people have said to you, some of the reactions and DMs. Just reflect on that for a minute.
It's a mixed bag. I will say I don't regret sharing it at all because I truly felt like the women that reached out that have also gone through a miscarriage were key to me being able to process and grieve and be able to try again. And I don't think I would have been able to get there without them. Having other women literally take the words out of your mouth just felt, it made me kind of put the pieces back together. So that was a plus. At the time, it was harder to hear. Now I can use it as an education piece. It's just really helping people with what not to say, because the comments that are said to women after a miscarriage are just, it blows my mind how people try to simplify what happened or downplay what happened to you. And so I really try, obviously at the time I wasn't in a place to be able to step up and say what needed to be said, but now I do. And I really try to teach others when somebody's going through something so hard and they just want somebody to understand that pain and you just brush it off like it was a nothing, makes it that much worse. Because I do have so many people say that they've changed their narrative with dealing with maybe a daughter or sister or friend going through a miscarriage because of what others have taught them. So I think we are definitely moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. And you shared some great examples in your book and just on Instagram. Some of them are, well, at least you weren't that far along. Wow.
Yes. Yeah, that's a common one. A lot of times I feel like people don't know what to say, so they kind of try to place the blame on you. I got a lot of, well, you travel, well, you work out, well, you kind of seem to live a little bit more of a stressful lifestyle, all those things. And, ultimately that I'm going to probably say is not the reason, multiple miscarriages happen.
I absolutely agree. And all those comments can, from the person who's saying those comments, they might truly in their heart think that they're helping. Like they might truly think like, oh, well, maybe I'm going to help her think of something that she hasn't thought of. Believe me, the person who's going through miscarriage has thought of everything and blamed themselves. So that is not helpful. And it just adds to the stigma and the shame and the guilt that this person already feels. One other thing that you said that I'd love to chat about a little bit is sometimes people say everything happens for a reason.
At that moment, that's not what you want to hear whatsoever. I do caution people on that a lot because you wouldn't say that to somebody else with a different kind of medical condition. I said this to somebody when I was dealing with secondary infertility. They were like, well, you have one child. You should be grateful. And I was like, so if your other leg got cut off, would I come to you and say, well, you got one leg, so you should be happy with that. Yeah. And when I put it in that perspective, this lady was like, I never looked at it that way. It doesn't mean you don't want for what you envision is complete for your family. Well, then what do you say? And I said, honestly, what was best for me is just my friends that said, look, nothing I'm going to say is going to fix this, but you tell me what you need. If you need us to come over and you want to cry and vent, we're here for you. If you want us to take you to a movie and nobody's going to talk about what happened, we'll do that for you. Tell us what you need.
You needed to go for another round of fighting in order to have your daughter. And you tell us a little bit about that journey and deciding on surrogacy. And you've been so open about it. I know that that's why she's here and how she's here, but that's a whole different struggle and fight and incredible outcome.
After the miscarriage, we did another transfer and it didn't even take. And then I started going through and getting every test possible to try to figure out what was happening. On paper, everything kept coming back fine. I have never given so much blood in my life. Every test you could think of. I mean, this is so TMI, but like one of the tests you had to like pee in a gallon jug and they tested all that and everything kept coming back fine. So the doctors were like, would you ever consider using a carrier? Maybe that's the best route. And so that was a whole nother can of worms that I was not prepared for. And then, of course, try finding a carrier when COVID starts. That was great.
My goodness.
So that was just a really hard time. And I will say for anybody listening, I, again, was very naive because we went and found an agency and the way it's laid out to you, to be completely blunt, I felt like it was going to be like Match.com. I was going to submit a profile. They were going to submit a profile. The agency was going to do our thing. We're going to find out if we were compatible. We're going to go on that first date and then see how it went. I remember we spent days meticulously writing this profile and picking out the perfect pictures. And then the agency was like, great, we actually don't have anyone now. We'll let you know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, where's my match? So we ended up really on our own speaking with doulas and midwives and just people that might know others in the community. And we actually had 2 carriers that didn't work out. No, 3. By this time, it's been almost another year. The night that the 3rd potential carrier, it fell through, the GC that we ended up who had our daughter ultimately slid into my DMs. That's what we like to joke about.
Oh my gosh. And GC means gestational carrier, just for anybody that's listening.
Yeah.
It can take a year. It can take 2 years. And also, no one has ever shared with me, but it makes so much sense that having a carrier not work out, fail, that can feel like yet another loss because you're losing time.
I was just so down, and she was like, I've had this message written for so many months, and I keep deleting it and then rethinking about it, and something told me tonight just to send it to you. And honestly, I was so upset that I didn't even believe it. So I was like, well, this is our agency. Like, if you're serious about this, this is who it would go through. And ended up, we were a match. We met multiple times. Then our husbands met. Then our kids met. And it was just this very natural fit.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. She went through, did a transfer, and it was a failed cycle.
I'm so sorry.
So at that point, I was like, okay. So I started getting second and third opinions, and everybody kept coming to the conclusion, we think it's the embryos at this point. Now that you've failed, she's failed, the cycles, we think we have to start again. So almost 7 years later, I went through another egg retrieval. I definitely was worried about age being a bit of a factor, but luckily everything turned out great. I did add a holistic approach along with the medical approach, did fertility acupuncture, took some supplements, just felt really good throughout it. Was very excited that we were able to move forward. And so we did another transfer and was pregnant. So excited. So went for the first test, comes back, and they're like, okay, you are pregnant, but the numbers are low, but that's okay as long as it doubles the next time. So we go back, it didn't double, but it moved up like 10 numbers or something. Mm-hmm. So like, well, come back a third time. Well, now this time it didn't double, but it went up like 40 numbers.
It's its own kind of torture, this sort of early pregnancy monitoring, not knowing. I am so sorry.
So now we need you to come back in like 10 days or something. Oh my gosh. So we go back and we see like a flutter. And then she was like, oh, there's a second sac now. I'm sorry, what? I was like, please tell me that what you're saying is what I'm thinking. And she was like, this could be why your numbers were so weird, that they're smaller. So now I am dead set that I'm having identical girls. And we're going to have matching names and matching clothes and just over the moon. they said, well, we need you to come back. I think it was, you would probably know, is it 10 days, 2 weeks? We need you to come back again. So I walked into that appointment and I was just, give me my news, give me my pictures. I was so excited. The midwife was in there and the tech, and she just looked at me and she just teared up. And I was like, oh no. And neither of them had any sort of heartbeat, but the sacs were growing. And so they were like, it's a blighted ovum, or double in this case. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea that your body could continue to grow essentially an empty sac, right? Mm-hmm. So they took me off all my meds, and I was just waiting to miscarry and waiting and waiting. And finally they were like, okay, we have to make a decision. You could have a D&C, or you can take something, and that'll be the end of that. So I remember going on to some support groups and asking, because I didn't really know what to do, and ultimately had a D&C. I remember it's 2 days before Mother's Day. It was awful. The months kept going by and I just felt off. Something was off. And just mentally, it was like torture, stretching out. At that point, I think when I had the D&C, I was close to 11 weeks at that point of blood work and tests, and you're pregnant, you're not pregnant. And so at that point, they were like, okay, do you want to do another transfer? What are you thinking? And I said, I can't. Physically, emotionally, I'm not there. And so we reached back out to our GC and just said, hey, would you ever consider doing another transfer? And she was like, yeah, I would love to. And we did. And she was pregnant, and now we have Lennox. And finally.
What are the mix of emotions kind of walking through a pregnancy with a gestational carrier?
You're definitely so grateful that somebody would do this for you. As I mentioned, she had a family of her own. So being pregnant and being like morning sickness, doctor's appointments, that's not easy, especially when you have your own children. And then to be very blunt, jealous. I wanted to carry her. I wanted to feel her kick. I wanted to do all those things. And I was really heartbroken because when I was pregnant with Brexton, I just always assumed that you'd get to do it again. So I don't feel like I lived it, did all the things, but you just always think that you get to do it again, right? And when you realize that you don't, well, maybe I would have taken more pictures, or maybe I would have made one of those casts in my belly, or maybe I would have done X, Y, and Z. Every waking moment is, well, I wonder what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Well, I wonder if, what are they eating? Are they driving? I'm nervous with them driving. If I could have put her in a bubble for 9 months, that would have been ideal, but that's not real life. So just that constant worry. And I think that's the difference. Somebody asked me every time I went for an ultrasound, they're like, oh, are you so excited for an ultrasound tomorrow? And I was like, not really. Why? I'm like, because I'm just waiting for them to tell me something's wrong. And I remember we got to, if she had delivered, she would have been full term. And I was still asking them, are you sure? Can you check again? Are we sure everything's okay? And they just were like, yes, it's fine. We promise you everything's fine.
Having a gestational carrier, that is the ultimate loss of control, because that person is carrying your baby. And I think it would have driven me crazy. And I think you're actually brave for completing your family that way. And I just want people to understand that. It is a totally unique thing, and you cannot be flippant about it.
Wow, that's the first time anybody said that. So thank you. It's hard because you want to respect your GC's life too. People are like, well, why aren't you spending more time with her? Because I don't want to invade her space. She has her own friends and family. I can't just show up on her doorstep every day and be like, let me touch your belly all day long and talk to it so that my baby knows me. Anyways, we were so excited. We were going to do this water birth, and I was going to get in the tub with her, and we planned all the things. And then unfortunately, her water leaked but didn't break. And then her labor stalled, And then we ended up in a hospital. And I laughed.
Samantha, do you expect anything else on your journey?
No, I was in crying. My mom said the same thing. She goes, "You didn't actually think this was going to go how you planned, right?" It was not funny, but one of my girlfriends, so we moved to the hospital. The midwife came. The hospital's great. I got to be in the room. I got to catch-ish because there was an issue. But I remember one of my girlfriends, she was like, "What in the world were you wearing?" And I was like, "That was my water birth outfit. It's all I had."
It's like a scuba suit. I'm just kidding.
I had black leggings and a black sports bra. I was ready for the tub. But anyways, the midwife was fantastic. And so I got to be right there. And it was just amazing. There's this picture that we have, and I'm kind of rubbing our GC's leg, and her husband has her hand. And it just felt like a very, just amazing, what somebody else would do for you to be able to complete your family. Yeah. And it just felt like she wanted me to be such a part of the process. So it was wonderful. Then Lennox came out, and of course, I'm laughing because she's okay now, but cord wrapped around her twice, blue, not crying, sucked in all the gunk.
So scary.
I just remember I was like, no.
Right.
This is not happening. And the midwife was just so calm. She, unwrapped the cord and gave her to me, and she wasn't crying. So we flipped her over together, and some of the gunk came out. And then basically as soon as the cord was cut, they took her from me, and she got suctioned with that machine, up her nose and down everything. And we saw everything come out, and then she was just full on screaming and got her color back, and we were like, okay. It was a journey. I can say with that cliche that we don't like when we're in it, but everything happened for a reason. And it's great. So it's awesome to see Brexton be a big brother, and just to know that hopefully, I guess why we share our story is I want people to know there were a lot of times that, am I going to be able to keep going? Am I going to be able to give up this step or that step or the complete loss of control? And I just feel like talking, whether it's podcasts or to other people in the infertility space, your biggest cheerleaders that you've never actually met. And I think that's just so amazing about this community is that, I've had girls that random hours of the night, I'd be like, what am I supposed to do? Not my best friends, but people that I've met through groups or chats or apps, whatever it might be, that were willing to kind of talk me down off the ledge and be like, okay, it's just another hurdle. We're going to keep going. And I think that's what's so special about this community.
Tell us about your Bundle of Joy nonprofit.
We're so excited. So we started the Bundle of Joy Fund because I think a big piece that isn't discussed a lot is just the extreme costs associated with infertility treatments. Don't get me on my soapbox. I'm not quite sure why insurance is not covering it, but that's a whole nother podcast.
A disease defined by the World Health Organization that benefits from medical treatment, but yet we are still able to deny coverage in most states. And I agree with you.
I feel a lot of that is because it's still looked at as just a women's issue, even though male factor. But so we started the Bundle of Joy Fund to be able to help couples that couldn't afford to go through IVF. Basically, I wanted to take away that financial barrier because I just thought it was heartbreaking if finances was the only reason that they couldn't move forward with the treatment that they were diagnosed and needed. We have given away over $1 million in grants already. Our grants are anywhere between $10,000 and $20,000. And we try to award, we do award 3 times a year. We try to go anywhere between 60 and 100 each cycle. And we're still not even granting half the people that apply.
But it's such an amazing gift. And if you can help even one person, it's incredible. And so this is in Charlotte, North Carolina, correct? The clinic?
Yes, at the Reach Clinic, correct.
That's great. I'm on the board for Baby Quest,
yes,
which is another grant it's national, but we have the same struggles. We, want to give grants to every single applicant, and we can't. I just really appreciate what you're doing, and I've seen it absolutely change people's lives. And anybody listening, resolve.org is a website. It's a patient-run nonprofit educational website, but they have a wonderful page on their website that's all about the fertility grants, and they're listed. And so you can find grants that are national or they are local. And so that could be a good resource for anybody that's listening.
Exactly.
I've learned so many lessons just listening to your story, but are there some that you would highlight?
I definitely would say if you're getting ready to start trying to go get tested, both partners, just to know pretty much the hand that you're dealt so that you're not wasting precious time, because I do feel like we wasted, as I mentioned, 18 months blindly trying. There are apps, there are online support groups, there are in-person support groups, there are women who will share their story and, you can DM with them. There are infertility therapists. It takes a village to get through this. And you might have the best partner, the best family, the best friends, but you need to connect with people who understand raw emotions that you're feeling and that can work through these situations with you. I really find that that's key.
You've said before that sometimes it's strangers that you can really be open with. Sometimes it's hard to share with really close family and friends because you're not only grieving, but you're having to educate them at the same time.
Yes.
Whereas someone in a fertility group online or resolve.org has online support groups, you can actually really share with people that are like, oh yeah, they get the acronyms, the IUI and IVF. And so I appreciate that advice too. Samantha, this has just been such an incredible conversation. I cannot thank you enough for coming on here today.
Thank you. I like to say that I love doing these podcasts because it's like free therapy.
That's great. Yeah, you're going through it, you're processing, you're sharing, and it helps others. People see you going through this, they're like, oh, I'm not the only one. Look at this beautiful, healthy person who also has struggled through fertility. It's not just me. So that your sharing has just helped so many. And so how can we find you?
Still an open book at Samantha Busch, Busch, on all social.
It's inspirational, and just thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today. I truly hope you enjoyed that conversation with Samantha Busch as much as I did. You could see her on Instagram and on reality TV, Racing Wives, and see this beautiful, accomplished, incredibly inspirational woman. And behind the scenes, she is fighting infertility to build her family. I appreciate her sharing her story and sharing all the emotions that came with this journey. I'm your host, Dr. Lora Shahine, and this is Baby or Bust. If you like this episode, let us know. Give us a 5-star review and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. Baby or Bust is produced by Mark Ramsey, Jamie Solis, and Greg Moga. Executive produced by Paul Anderson for Workhouse Media. Baby or Bust is a Mark Ramsey media production.